לשבת.
אתה מסמן לי ככה מתי, אני מצלמה פתוחה, אני עדיין פתח אודיו שאתה מסמן לי ככה.
זהו.
ושאלות...
גם ציטה אתה מותר, איזה כן.
באמצע. זאת אומרת היוטיוב ברגע שזה משקת. אתה מסמן לי ככה מתי, אני מצלמה פתוחה, אני עדיין פתח אודיו שאתה מסמן.
אוקיי, בוא תשים את זה בצד. תאשר את כולם.
חבר'ה, אני משום מה, אתם התנתקתם לי.
מה זאת אומרת?
זאת אומרת שאני רק שומע אתכם, אני רק שומע אתכם בקול, אין לי זה.
אתה שומע אותי, אייל?
אני שומע, אבל כאילו הכל, אתה כפול לי, ואני לא רואה כלום כרגע.
שנייה.
אוקיי, רגע, אנחנו נטפל בזה.
מחובר למצלמה. תסתכל, בדיוק כמו בזה. הוא מחובר לאודיו, ולחיבור של הכל, הוא מחובר לגיימינג, אתה רואה?
הוא גם כאילו המצלמה שלי קפואה, זאת אומרת, למרות שהיא פתוחה אני רואה שחור, אני לא רואה את עצמי במרקע.
אנחנו רואים אותך מעולה.
אנחנו רואים ושומעים אותך מעולה.
אז אני רגע מתנתק ומנסה להתחבר עוד הפעם, כי משהו...
אני כל פעם, אני כל הזמן.
Hej allihopa, vi har en lite teknikutmaning med Eyal. Han har loggat ut och han loggar in igen, så lite tålamod och vi är snabbt med det.
הנה, יאללה עכשיו.
לא, עכשיו הכל בסדר.
אוקיי, מצוין. לדעתי אפשר להתחיל.
Hej, god kväll. Jag är jätteglad idag att kunna samtala med Lieutenant Colonel in Reserve, Eyal Dror. Jag börjar på svenska och sen snart byter jag till engelska, därför Eyal kan inte så bra svenska tror jag. Om ni har frågor, första delen av samtalet, Eyal kommer att presentera sig själv och sin arbete och sen det finns tid för att sätta frågor till Eyal. Jag har med mig Ziv och Aviad och de kommer att hjälpa mig. Så om ni vill fråga Eyal något fråga så ni bara raise the hand. Och Ziv ska säga till mig vem är den och jag vill gärna att vi ska fråga honom direkt genom chatten. Good evening, Eyal.
Good evening. Hello,
We are really
Shachar.
happy and proud to have you in the Jewish community of Gothenburg. We have tonight with us also the Swedish Israeli Friendship Association and a couple of our members, and we also send it live through our YouTube channel. Eyal, before we start, I would really want you to that you tell us a little bit about yourself and about what you did between 2016 and 2018.
Great. Shahar, I will just ask you to give me, okay, great. I will, with your permission, I will share something with you and then I will introduce myself a little bit more. Please tell me if the presentation is working, Shachar.
Yeah, it's working great, Eyal.
Okay, so before I will introduce myself, please, I want to read you something in Arabic. Can you see it?
Yes, we can.
Great. It is written here, Assalamu alaikum. بإذن الله بكرة تلين على إدلب. كل الشكر والتقدير والاحترام لكم جميعا. أتمنى لكم مزيدا من التقدم والازدهار. دامكم ودام دولة القانون. لا ننساكم أبدا. This message, and it's translated to English, I got it from this man wearing black. His face is covered. We cannot expose his face and also his name. We will call him Dr. B. He was one of my Syrian colleagues that worked with me on the biggest humanitarian operation conducted ever by the IDF, maybe one of the biggest conducted ever by any army in the world. And when I got this message from him, I know that it was the end. This message I got in July 2018. So good evening, Shachar, and good evening, everybody. As mentioned, my name is Eyal Dror. I'm married. I have 3 wonderful children, and I live in the most beautiful place in Israel, in the Golan Heights, the northern part of the state of Israel. Basically, you can see the picture here, and the picture which is behind my back. This is something that I took from my balcony, the Mount Hermon, the only place in Israel that we have snow. And I was privileged to serve my country as an IDF officer for 24 years. I'm a lieutenant colonel by my military rank. Most of my service, I served in the coordination and liaison position with the Palestinians in Gaza and Hebron, Bethlehem. And in the 3 last years of my years regarding to your question, Shachar, between 2016 and 2018, I was privileged to establish the biggest humanitarian operation, Operation Good Neighbor, which is the topic of our conversation. By the way, it was so big that when it ended, I decided to retire the IDF, not to go forward to become a colonel. Today, I'm a civilian. I'm still serving as a reserve officer in the Bashan division, which protecting the Israeli-Syrian border. And between being a husband and a father after so many years that I wasn't at home, I'm writing my PhD at the University of Haifa. I wrote a book which hopefully will be published this year about Operation Good Neighbor. And I'm speaking and meeting with people in Israel and outside Israel, students, delegations, in order to share with them what we have done. So this is a little bit about myself. And with your permission, I will start to speak about Operation Good Neighbor. By the way, if I had just one slide, if Shachar would have given me just 1 minute to share with you the true meaning of Operation Good Neighbor, probably I would use this one. A picture drawn by an Assyrian child. It is written here, Shukran Israel ala al-musa'ada wal-hub. Thank you, Israel, for the help and for the love. This child drew it when he was hospitalized in Israel. The person who knows the history between Israel and Syria, it's something that was impossible a couple of years ago and become reasonable thanks to Operation Good Neighbor. We will do a short introduction to understand how we reached this operation. And let's take a look a little bit about our neighborhood, the Middle East. I'm sure that most of you are familiar with the state of Israel, surrounded by some Arabic countries. And we are speaking about Syria. And if I want to be even more correct, we're speaking about the Golan Heights, the Israeli-Syrian border. This is where our story happened. And it started because the Arab world exposed in 2010 the Arab Spring, which began in Tunisia and spreaded to Algeria and Egypt, Libya, and also to Syria. By the way, unfortunately for the Syrians, after a couple of months, this demonstration against the regime, while the Syrian residents protest against their corrupted regime, it became one of the most tragic events the world exposed during the last 50 years. A terrible civil war in which 1 million people lost their lives. 6 million became refugees. They had to escape from their home country, and they are living in bad conditions in the Arabic world, in Turkey and Jordan. The lucky people are living in Europe. Some of them I know even reached to Sweden. How do I know it? Because I got some messages from those countries, the European countries. The country has been destroyed. But this is happening in Syria. So how it is connected to Israel, and why should Israel do a humanitarian operation, such a big one? Well, the answer is very simple. The Israeli-Syrian border was quite quiet for 40 years. You can see Mount Hermon. As a member of the family Dror, my family paid the price. In 73 war, a terrible war between Israel and Syria, My father's cousin, who was a lieutenant colonel, lost his life on Mount Hermon while he was leading his soldiers. But since the end of this terrible war for 40 years, it was completely silent, not a single terror attack. When the Syrian civil war started, we found on the border, and take a look at this map. This is here the border between Israel and Syria. By the way, here on the southern part is Jordan, and on the northern part is Lebanon. But what happened in Syria, it was divided. It was divided because there were so many organizations who fought against the regime. So we had on the border, if anybody of you visit Israel and came to the area named Tel Saki, you might understand that this was the location. This was the location of the ISIS. The Islamic State had a piece of southern part of Syria. The Assad regime withdrew from the border for 30 kilometers away. But when we were speaking about the Assad regime, we were speaking about Hezbollah and Iran. And on the green area, we found some organizations like Al-Qaeda and other radical Islamic groups. Basically, all of our good friends, Hezbollah, ISIS, Al-Qaeda, were on this border. When I'm saying good friends, of course, it's cynically because all of these organizations swear to destroy the state of Israel. But we are not here to speak about army and about fighting. We are going to speak about human beings. I want to speak with you about 250,000 human beings who were living in the green area. 250,000 human beings who were living, some of them, in tents, without electricity, without water, sending their children to such schools. By the way, the winter time in the Golan Heights is very tough. It's raining, it's even snowing. Can you imagine what will happen to this class after the first rain? Can you imagine little children really learning in this class? By the way, I don't know if there is any doctors or paramedics in the crowd, but this is how it was looking in emergency room in one of their temporary hospitals. Why temporary hospitals? Because the hospital has been destroyed by the regime. The regime destroyed the infrastructure of this area, by the way, of almost all Syria, all the places they fought against him. Last remark about Syrians. Those people were educated to hate us, the Israelis, for centuries. This was the Assad regime propaganda that Israel is the enemy. The only thing that Israel wants is to conquer their land, to kill them, to steal their land. So they were living in very severe conditions, but educated for centuries for the hate and fear from Israel. But I think they understand that they are living in such bad conditions. Moved that in February 2013, first Syrian arrived at the fence and asked for help from the IDF. They risked their lives because the IDF soldiers on that spot didn't know who are they, and they could have think that they are enemy. They took a chance. It was so disappeared, so exhausted and so in bad conditions that they took a chance, reached the border fence, and the Israeli soldiers, by the way, didn't shoot them. The Israeli soldiers opened their heart, opened the border, and let them inside Israel. They saved those lives. And since that year, 3,500 Syrians during 3 years has been saved. When we are speaking about saving lives, it's including this child. He's 14 years old. His home has been destroyed by a Syrian bomb. He was almost burned to death. And we had to call a helicopter to evacuate him to Israel. 3 years, 3,500 Syrians treated and saved by Israel. And some trust was built. The Israelis and the Syrians decided to do more. The Israelis and the Syrians decided to establish Operation Good Neighbor, a new unit in the IDF, which will be focusing on saving the lives of the Syrians. My mission as the commander was to think 24/7 about the enemy, or if I will say it in other words, to think about human beings living in an enemy country. So I want to take you with me to the border to share with you one night, one of many nights. Aviad shared those nights with me. He was one of my soldiers. The purpose of this meeting on a border wasn't with people who needed life-saving treatment. It was to help children suffering from chronic diseases. So take a look at this picture and trying to think how an IDF officer is feeling like when he knows that he's going a fence which is controlled by some of our enemies in order to give aid to other people, but he doesn't know if the enemy will take any advantage. This meeting happened every week. 25 children, 25 mothers entered the state of Israel, and here it was the mission. By the way, when we are speaking about meeting on the fence, I can tell you that from my point of view, it's so tragic to see a 4 or 5 years old boy or girl crossing the border fence in a rainy night and they are barefoot. They do not have shoes. As a father, it can break your heart. It's something that the mind cannot accept. So we bring them to the hospital to treat them. And when we were in the hospital, well, we didn't worry from ISIS. And we heard the stories, so tragic stories. I played football with one of the children. He was falling down, but he wasn't crying. So I asked his mother, surprisingly, why your child is not crying? He get hurt. She looked at me and told me he's not crying because he knows that nobody cares. And while I was speaking with this boy with the red shirt, ask him, when you will be adult, what do you want to do with your life? He wasn't answering. After 3 times, he told me, I will not be an adult. I will probably die. Can you accept the word that children do not cry because nobody cares and cannot see their future? This was the reality of the Syrian lives. This was what we exposed. And when we become able to make them smile, it was a victory. It was a victory because at that spot we understood that before we are officers and before we are IDF soldiers, we are first human beings. And as human beings, we did the right thing to do. It wasn't connected to the fact that we are Israelis, they are Syrians, we are Jews, they are Muslims. We are all human beings. And as human beings, we did the right thing to do. We treated 1,400 children during this operation. And the operation became wider. And we had to collaborate. We had to collaborate with organization. By the way, we asked the UN for help. We asked the EU for help. We asked countries for help. Nobody responds. So we found some NGOs, small organizations, focusing in doing humanitarian aid. One of them were Americans, Christian people named Friendships Unlimited. They built this facility, a field clinic, not in a hospital, not a place to do surgery. It's simply field clinic if we can just put Hadassah on a shtick, it will be helpful. Aviad?
לא שומעת. מה?
תשים...
אפילו שהשתקתי, אני לא שומעת. כלום.
Oh, thank you, Hadassah. So this field clinic was able to treat 8,000 Syrians. Now, again, for us, the people living in Sweden and Israel, giving some antibiotics is not a big issue. You just need to go to your family doctor and you will get it. To get some ear drops, it's, well, I don't even need a description for the doctor. I will just cross the street and go to the pharmacy. In Syria, you don't have it. In Syria, you don't have it. 8,000 Syrians were treated. Okay, so I was on mute now. Can you hear me? Great. But I think that what was even more amazing than just giving those Syrians antibiotics was the thinking of those Americans that if you want to heal a person, you should focus on his soul. And they built this playground, and it was full of smile, full of happiness, full of hope. Children were playing. Children shot to the basket. Children ate ice cream. By the way, I don't know how is the weather in Sweden. In Israel, we always think that in Sweden every day is snowing and you don't have any sun. Maybe I'm correct, maybe I'm not, but I'm sure that from time to time you are eating ice cream. In Syria, if you were a child who born from 2011, you didn't eat ice cream in your life. Can you imagine? Ice cream, so simple. You cannot eat it because you don't have any electricity. So for this girl, it was the first time. For this boy, it was the first time hugging a teddy bear. 8,000 Syrians entered to this area. By the way, Operation Good Neighbor didn't focus just on giving medical aid. Yeah, by the way, you heard about the project with the children, you heard about the field clinic. We built a maternity hospital in which 1,000 Syrian babies were born inside one of the Syrian villages. We made a clinic for birth mothers, but it was even wider because we provide them clothes. We spoke about the weather in the Golan Heights. It's winter. The winter is strong. The winter is rough. But again, it's not like the winter in Sweden, I guess. But for us, the Israelis, well, you know, if we have snow, it's a celebration. This year we have 4 times snow in Mount Hermon, and all the Israelis become crazy because, wow. When you are living in a tent, my friend, without any heaters, a coat which keep you dry will save your life. I need your help to calculate it, how many lives we saved by providing 350 tons of coats, of warm clothes. And we provide them flour and meat and oil and sugar, basic groceries that they will be able to eat well. And diesel fuel. Because if you want to have some light, you need diesel fuel. And you need a generator. Please remind these 2 pictures because one day I got from my colleague this picture. An ice cream. In the first, I didn't understand why did he send it to me? Because I called him and I told him, I will not going to provide you any ice cream. This is not my job. This is not Operation Good Neighbor. With all due respect, I'm not going to risk the life of my soldiers. And you should understand that every time we reach the border fence, we risk our lives because it was in a hostile area controlled by enemies. And he was laughing. He told me, no, my friend, I don't want from you. I don't need this ice cream. but this ice cream is because of you. So I told him, how so? He told me, you remember that last week you provided some diesel fuel and a generator. I told him, of course. And he told me, that this is the day for a holiday. I told him, this is also, I can agree, because we provide you also meat and some cakes. And he told me we had the possibility to smuggle some ice cream from Damascus in order to bring it to our children. So the children ate for the first time in their lives. All the village ate ice cream for the first and for the only time in their lives. Well, it's not a life-saving, but you can agree with me that this point gave them some hope to continue with their lives. Now, 700 humanitarian operation, 700 times that we chose to risk our lives for the Syrians. If you calculate it, you will see that it was 2, 3, even 4 times any night. Long nights, little sleep. The weather is not a very good friend in the Golan Heights, but we chose to continue and do so 700 times. 400 million shekels of donation that we got with equipment. We didn't get money, we got equipment worth 400 million shekels. Medicine, medical equipment, diapers, food, whatever. We send it to the Syrians. A field clinic. Teams that entered inside of Christian doctors and paramedics and treated the Syrians. After those 3 years, the operation unfortunately came to an end. In the summer of 2018, the Syrian regime with the Russians started to bomb this area, the Syrian Golan Heights, and the people had to surrender it. We had a chance, we had a time for one last operation. I don't know if you heard about the white helmets. If not, I advise you to read a little bit in Google about them. The white helmets operated all over Syria. There were civilians who, when the war started, they volunteered to take some courses in life-saving and rescue saving, and they were the first to reach any place in Syria that the regime had bombed it. By the way, they were the first to expose the world that the regime is using gas and bombing civilian facilities. So they were condemned to death. In the last days of the operation, our prime minister got some phone calls from his colleagues in the world, asking him to save those people. And this was the last operation. We opened the border fence for 10 hours, a whole night. I spoke with you about how dangerous it was to open it for 30 or 45 minutes. We opened it for 10 hours in order that more than 400 people, men, women, children, babies, entire families, will enter the state of Israel. By the way, they are not refugees in Israel. The international agreement said that Israel will rescue them because they couldn't have run to Jordan. The border with Syria and Jordan was reoccupied by the Syrian regime. So Israel will save them, will rescue them. And we took them to the Israeli-Jordanian border. They crossed the border that morning, and they got new identities from the countries who support them, new lives. They are living among us, but they are living. If they would have stayed another 24, 48 hours in Syria, some of them might want with us. The operation came to an end, and just before I will finish, I want to conclude this talk with this picture. Because if we spoke about things that was impossible and become reasonable, take a look at this picture. So I'm sure that all of you recognize the flag. I will tell you the story behind this picture, behind the flag of my lovely country. Wiham was a 9-year-old girl, suffered from severe diabetes. She reached in one of the nights to the border fence and we rescued her, took her to the Israeli hospital in Tzfat. The Israeli doctors told me that 24 hours later, she wouldn't have survived. It is really in the last minute. The Israeli doctors treated her for 6 months. And before she went back home to Syria, she asked us how to draw the flag of Israel. So she drew the flag of Israel. But I think that what is even more exciting is what she wrote above. On the left side, she wrote her name, Wiham, and she added the sign of love. But what is written here, it's a mystery. She wrote here the Arabic name Abu Yaqub, the father of Jacob. When asking people who is Abu Yaqub, the father of Jacob, they are telling me, oh, of course, it's easy, it's Isaac. She wasn't a religious girl, so she didn't mean to Isaac. Abu Yaqub, my friend, was my Syrian name. This is how the Syrian knew me. A Syrian girl who drew the flag of Israel and dedicated to an IDF officer who saved her life. Something that was impossible a couple of years ago and become reasonable thanks to Operation Good Neighbor. Wiham will not forget the state of Israel. The White Helmets people will not forget us. 250,000 people, human beings, who used to think that we are the devil, will not forget us. They become familiar with the Israelis. Thank you very much. It was my pleasure to speak with you and my honor. And now, Shahar, the stage is yours, and I will be more than happy to answer to your questions. I will stop sharing the presentation so we will be able to see each other and continue the discussion. Thank you very, very much to you all.
Thank you very much, Eyal. Thank you for sharing this amazing story. For me, that I spent a couple of years of my life in the Golan Heights, it's amazing to hear your story. I can't understand that Israeli opened the border for so many years, and the challenge that you had is, I as an old soldier, I really, really appreciate it, and I really can't understand how you did it. If we have questions from the audience, please raise your hand, and after you raise your hand, Ziv is going to tell me, and we are going to ask you to unmute. I have a question for you, Eyal. Just to understand, are you an intelligence officer, or are you coming from the medicine corps?
So no, I'm not an intelligence officer. I'm an officer who served all of his career in the COGAT, the Coordination of Government Activities and Territories, coordinate with the Palestinians. If I would have been an intelligence officer, this operation couldn't have happened.
Okay.
Because if the Syrian people would think that we are doing this for intelligence reasons, nobody of them would enter to Israel. They were too afraid because they do not want, in the Middle East, you don't want to be preserved as an Israeli spy, Israeli collaborator. So this is why nobody chose an intelligence officer to become the commander of this operation.
I understand. I'm sorry, I just saw your hat color, and I thought it's the green color, it's intelligence. I understand. But how did you manage? How did you manage to make a difference between terrorists, as you said? There was ISIS in the border, there was Hezbollah in the border. How do you know the difference between enemy and someone that needs help?
So from our perspective, anyone who reached the border was a human being who needed help. We didn't check their IDs or passports. They do not have it. And we didn't ask them questions. We also didn't have intel. So yeah, it could have been a situation that a terrorist entered Israel. And I will ask you, Shachar, so what have been happened? We didn't afraid that he will pick up intelligence because they were only in the way to the hospital. We were worried that when we are on a fence, someone can try to attack us, but we did everything that need to secure ourselves. While he is meeting with us, after we understand that he is not a threat, we can take him to the hospital. I can tell you that we didn't work on the black area on which was controlled by ISIS. But yeah, it could have been random acts that some of them was a person who fought with one of these organizations and he doesn't like the state of Israel. I think that what was amazing in this project that we didn't ask them questions. I think that this is why it was so successful. This is why they had trust in us, because they understood that we are treating them as human beings, not as Muslims, not as Syrians, as people who need help. And I can say that I'm proud that my country chose to help those people, because nobody was expecting that Israel would do so. We could have been behind the fence that we have there, and nobody forced us to open it. I think that the Syrians understood it and appreciate it very, very much.
Are they supposed to do it, of course? Do we have questions, Z?
Yeah.
Who has a question?
First, we have a question from Jessica Daran.
Yes, Jessica, please, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Yeah, I was just wondering to which extent did the Israelis in the Golan know about the project and what was going on their side and the other side of the border? And my second question while I'm here is who provided you with all the clothes and food that you needed?
So thank you for those questions. All the equipment was supplied by organizations that we work with, NGOs, Christian, Muslims, Jews, Israel's organization. By the way, some of them were picked up by civilians without any organization. For example, you asked me about the Golan Heights. It was an initiative of the Golan Heights people from all the villages in the Golan Heights to pick up clothes for the winter, and they sent it to us. It was a huge operation because we had to send trucks to all of the villages in the Golan Heights and to pick from them clothes. So the Golan Heights people knew about the terrible war. They had the bombing. They knew that there is something because the operation wasn't published until 2017. So just after a year we published it. They knew that something has happened because they saw the lights on the fence every night. They saw the Israeli ambulances coming from the fence. When we published it, I can tell you that I got dozens of telephones from the Golan Heights residents who cherish us. Even today, from time to time, when I'm meeting people from the Golan Heights, they say that they were so appreciated that we are protecting them, because this was the mission of my division, protecting them by helping the others. So when it was published, the Israeli people knew about it. Unfortunately, not enough. It wasn't published enough. But they know about it. And as much as I know, 95% of the people support this operation. Of course, the minority is always the minority that say, no, we didn't have to help them, blah, blah, blah. Okay, I can hear them. I cannot agree with them.
Thank you very much. Do you have more questions?
Yeah, Nils Lewinsky.
Nils, please unmute yourself and ask your question.
Yes. I couldn't join you for the first half hour, but I hope you didn't answer my questions already. did you have any guarantee from the Russian or Assad? Because what should I say? The policy of them was to demolish infrastructure like hospitals and so on, to get the people not have the equipment, or what you will say about this, to demolish the people also. And the second thing, did this rumor that you have a hospital spread all over Syria? I
Okay,
mean, a lot of people came because they heard about this and so on, and they wanted to have treatment.
yes. So the first question, I didn't spoke about it, and we didn't have any agreement with the Russians. Let's say that we are now not in a classified conversation. So I know, I can assure you that the Russian knew about this project. The Syrian regime knew about it. The Syrian regime didn't like this project because it's against propaganda. But I think the Assad regime understood that, okay, so the Israelis are helping our people. Should I bomb one of these activities and mess up with the IDF? I think no. So they knew about it. They sent threat to the Syrians people that they will punish them when they will come and control them. By nothing was against us, nothing happened on the field against us. Regarding to the second question, where we spoke about it, so we didn't have so many. We built a maternity hospital inside Syria, inside one of the villages, and we opened a field clinic. We spoke about it, the field clinic by one of the American NGOs that work with us, treated 8,000 Syrians. And yeah, I can tell you, by the way, in Israel, it was treated approximately 6,000 Syrians. And I can tell you that yes, the rumor has spreaded in the southern part of Syria. If in the beginning of the operation, we helped the villages that was very close to the border, during the second half of the project, we received patients from 40 kilometers inside Syria because rumors spread. And even when they have the choice to go to Jordan to get a free treatment, or to Israel to get it in free, they chose to arrive Israel because they knew that the Israeli doctors will treat them in the best way they can. Thank you for this question, Niels.
Do you have more questions? No. I have another question to you. You mentioned that you asked for international help. Didn't you get any response, or you just what was the response? Why didn't they help?
You speak about the UN?
UN, European Union, Sweden. I don't know who you asked.
So I can tell you that I think that one of the reasons that this operation was such a big success, it was because politics almost wasn't involved. When we asked the UN and the EU, well, some of these organizations, and we spoke for many organizations, we asked approximately 20 organizations that working on a field of humanitarian aid in the world. And we asked them to join. We said to them, very simple thing. We will open the fence, go inside and treat the Syrians. They need aid. They all refuse. Some of them said to us that those people are not even in a humanitarian crisis because, yeah, there was part in Syria that the Syrians were living in even worse conditions. Some of them told us it is a little bit hard for us to work because, the Golan Heights is an area not under consensus because it was occupied. It may be a Syrian territory. This thing I cannot accept, with all due respect. Because when there is a war and people are dying, put the politics outside and go inside. Unfortunately, this was the answer that we got from those organizations, and this is why we had to go and find small organizations that do not involve with politics and want to do this project.
Thank you. We have a question from Aviad.
Hey, Eyal. So first of all, this is actually the first time that I'm experiencing this talk. As a soldier, of course, I was with you there in the border, but I never really heard the talk of all the reasons why we did what we did. Of course, I'm very proud of it. But I do have a question. Can you still say the reasons that Israel did this and actually helped Israel? Maybe it helped the security, etc.
So of course, we have to understand the IDF is not a humanitarian organization. Our job is not to provide food to the people in need. If we will get order, by the way, the IDF did so a year and a half in Israel when one of the cities were with the corona issue and the IDF soldiers provide them food, okay? But this is not the job, of course, of the IDF. The state of Israel understood, and we are mixing here strategic thinking, tactical thinking, and Jewish values. Because on the one hand, we understood that we cannot sit behind the fence and to see people dying. The compassion, the mutual aid is something that we as Jews, whereas Israelis are proud of it. This is why Israel is asked to send help for Lebanon 4 times during the last year. But we also understood that we have an historical chance to meet the Syrians and not to convince them, to expose them to the Israelis. From the military reason, we thought, we didn't knew it, nobody signed an agreement with us, but we thought that if the Syrian people will know that we are not the devil and we are willing to risk our lives in order to save them, it might minimize terror. Less terror organization will have the will to come and to attack Israel from this border. So it was like a win-win situation. By the way, by saying that, I could have said that some organization could have thought or could have shoot to Israel. It wouldn't have stopped this operation. So if we're taking the understanding that we don't have the ability to sit without do something when something is very close to us, unfortunately, we cannot help all the citizens in Syria. But our neighbors, we can help them. We can let them know us, and maybe we will secure the border by this. So again, it's a win-win situation in my opinion, and I'm happy that we did it, because the other way to secure the border, again, as military person, is to conquer land. When you conquer land, well, basically, or most of the time, bad things happened. So I'm really happy that we could have do so, helping them, let them know us, and minimize the terror from this border when it was completely chaos.
Thank you very much. Do we have more questions? No. Eyal, I really want to thank you on behalf of the Jewish community of Gothenburg and the other people that are with us tonight first of all, thank you for the amazing work that you did, and thank you that you took your time and talked to us. I would like also to thank my colleague Aviad. Thanks to him, we had a contact with you. And you mentioned that you are maybe coming to Norway soon. So if you're coming to Norway, we would really be more than happy to have you here as a guest of our community and knowing you on live. So I really want to thank everyone that took their time today to listen to you, and to Ziv and Aviad that helped you with the technical. And I hope I'll see you again soon in the community, and less Zoom and more live meeting. Bye bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.